This is the July 5th meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. Bringing it to order at 7:02. The first item of the agenda is to review the agenda for any removals, adjustments of any items. I have nothing to suggest. Is there anybody in the group that has an issue or something they'd like to suggest? Hearing nothing, we'll proceed. Item 2, administrative matters. We have 2 new planning commission members that I'd like to welcome. Fred Baser and Slim Pickens, or actually your name's John.
Slim will do.
So there might be some people that know you by John, but Slim Pickens, and welcome both of you. And you have the dubious honors of filling out the planning commission to a full 9-member board, which has been fleeting at times in the last few years. So welcome aboard and thank you for serving.
Thank you.
And Peggy?
Yeah.
Jeff just arrived in person as well.
Great.
The next order of business is approval of the minutes of the May 3rd meeting and the June 7th meeting.
Pull those up and share them here in a sec if people want.
Okay, a motion to,
I entertain a motion. I did read both of them and they did appear to be the correct minutes this time on the May note minutes. I did not check for spelling errors or.
so we have a motion by Shannon. Anybody seconding? Can somebody second that or willing to second it? Okay, Rob seconds. And is there any discussion? You're in crickets here, so bring it to vote. Everybody is in favor of approving the minutes. Say aye.
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 Any abstentions? One abstention.
That was Fred.
Fred abstains.
I wasn't here for the meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so that is, still sounds like they are approved. Next item on the agenda for item 2 is zoning administrator report. You got anything for us?
I do have, so let me share my screen with the rest of the world here real quick. There we go. Let me just share. 1 second.
Kevin, did you want to do the June meeting minutes?
Yeah, so I had brought them both up, and so I considered them both part of that motion,
Oh, thank you.
I believe. Is that what you intended, Shannon?
Yes, that is what I intended. I'm sorry if I was not clear.
I don't want to speak. I shouldn't speak for you.
So what I ran for a report today from a zoning standpoint, so it's on the screen. This is the first 6 months of permits that went out as far as building, and there's 1 sign permit that fell in there too, but they're terrible reports. But so you'll see the owner's name, and then right below it is a description of what the permit was. I didn't want to do a big long, because nobody really needs the boring minutia of acreage and all that. But you'll see that we saw quite a few single family homes really starting to pop up in the last 6 months. It's been pleasantly busy. I would say Jeff is on this list. So we're, like I said, we're seeing quite a bit of activity, which has been a little bit of a surprise. I thought the market, with cost of materials still through the roof, would slow down a tad. Really hasn't. Quite a few of these are actually started, or at least beyond just planning phase. A lot of people have, and then the other big one you'll see is the 4th one down, which is the Stony Hill Properties. That is their 20-unit project next to the fire station. That's all permitted through the town. And they were hoping to break ground a month or two ago, and I don't know what's going on. I heard that they had a small hiccup with Act 250. They had a small grammatical error, which caused them possibly months of delay. But they're still plowing forward with that project, which is awesome. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Chris?
Yeah, I do. On the, I just noticed on the Burritt one, it has also a 40 by 45 foot garage, which doesn't seem like a normal residence size garage. I was wondering what's going on with that one and maybe where it's located.
So it's a single family home. It looks, that entire building is both the home and the garage is one. They did a single story. As Chris said, they're aging. They don't want a second story. They own a 2-story home in Moncton that they're parting ways with. And if you look at the garage, there's 2 entrances from the west side. And then there's an overhead door that'll be on the south side. There's actually a partition in it, and that's more of a utility shed concept as well that they integrated. So that's where their mower and bikes and kayaks and all that would live. And they just really wanted to segregate their cars from their stuff.
This is the one on Plank Road, maybe?
About 2 doors down from the cemetery.
Yep, thanks. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. The next item is the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. Rob, do you have an update for us?
I do not. Our meeting is next week because the 4th it got pushed. So,
Okay.
or not next week, the week after that.
Week after.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is miscellaneous correspondence. I did get a couple pieces of correspondence that I listed out in the chair notes. The BPAC committee meeting minutes, which we were incorporated because there's interest in what that group is doing around town. There was an inquiry on zoning reg adoption that I included. I don't know the backstory on it, but I think the expectation was that the planning commission should be doing more to let people know when they're being affected by zoning changes. However, you would end up doing that effectively. I don't think there's any open issues on that. I haven't heard any more on that.
Just trying to share my screen again. I'm just going to pull that up so you can see it. So, which
It's right up at the top. It'd be underneath. It's just a summary up. Or scroll up further. So it's right there.
So I believe this is the same folks that I've spoke to a number of times in the last 2 weeks. They're unhappy that a lot is being developed next to their home. It's unfortunate. It's a building lot. It's a legal building lot. The owner has a permit. They were very irritated that the only notification you get when a by right structure is going up is the permit notice poster. And we don't notify neighbors. We don't send out letters to neighbors. That's not how the process was intended, and that's not the law. And that did not sit well. And I'm like, so that's sort of the backstory behind those. They'd like to stop the project, and I'm like, but they missed their window of appeal, and now they're angry.
And I also got the opinion that they were expecting the owners to go on the planning commission to notify people have any changes too, which is unruly at best. So I don't know. There's a transportation
Could I
grant.
just, so if it's a by right thing, a simple, I don't like it,
Doesn't fly.
doesn't apply, right? Unless you could bring up some violation of the regs.
Correct. So like if their sighting was inside the setbacks or, I mean, it's very, I try to scrutinize the permit. So if somebody comes and says, oh, I want to build my house and it's gonna be here, I'm like, no, you gotta move it 10 feet to the left out of the setbacks. Or if there was a specific building envelope for their parcel, and they were gonna be out of it, that you could appeal.
That you could appeal whatever the time, right?
Well, within the 15 days.
Oh, you can't.
After that, then you can try to pursue civil litigation
Okay.
and it fails miserably.
So how, if they aren't moved, I guess I'm thinking out loud here, but if they aren't notified, then how do they know what the 15-day window is?
So every poster, so the way we notify for by right, so everyone has seen those cute little posters with the P on it.
So the permit gets hung and
Yep.
it's 15 days from the,
From the issue date, there's an issue date and there's an appeal by date on that poster. That's a poster that was supplied to us, I think,
that's pretty standard.
either VLCT or something like that. That's in our regs, and I would have to double check, but I'm almost certain we pulled that. For some reason, I think it's in statute, but I could be wrong through the notification process. So that's how we've always notified. I get it. People don't like it. Sometimes because, well, I didn't see it. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. One of the two I've got going on right now, I happened to go by the site and saw the poster right by the roadside. I mean, these people put it right by the roadside because they already knew there was some contention with their neighbor, and they're like, we don't want there to be any question. It's there, because some people do, they'll put it in a window where it's not quite as visible as it could be. But
Okay.
What property is that? I missed it.
It's just, the name's protected, the
yeah,
name has been redacted.
yeah. So I've got two of them. I've got
Okay.
one in the village and one outside of the village. It's the best I can
Okay.
do.
I'm sorry, I
Um,
can't read that because I can't see that. It needs to be bigger, so
See if I can.
I can't
pull
see
that
the
up.
document. Sorry.
Is that any better?
There we go. Thank you.
So the next piece of correspondence is whether there's a notification of transportation grant offering, which I just bring it up here as I don't believe it's anything we're interested in pursuing. There's been some correspondence about floodplain training. I sat in on one. It's much more tactical than it is a planning function. But it sounds like that particular group of A&R types is going to start a series of trainings for floodplain activities. So there's some more awareness. So I think that's it for miscellaneous contract. If anybody's got any further questions or comments. Move on to the next item. Next item is continuing business. We got a contract proposal from Ashland County Regional Planning Commission. Kind of last minute. I'd hoped to have it sent out with the agenda so everybody could have a little bit more time than just a few minutes at this meeting, and but it didn't work out that way. And then earlier, as we were starting, there were some questions about the history and what we're doing, and Chris was going into a very good explanation of the different zones and whatnot. So I don't know if I think maybe we just take a few minutes to get our new members or newer members up to speed with that, or any questions of where we're at or where we think we're going with that. We did, as a Planning Commission apply for and receive a state housing, community and development grant for what they term as bylaw modernization. The intent is to provide additional housing in higher density areas, fit infill, change in use, and in certain areas, you know, it could affect zone or parking and those sort of things. If you, with a municipal water system or wastewater system, you obviously have a whole different set of densities than you do if you don't have wastewater, which is our situation. And then Chris was embellishing a little bit with the different zones that we have. When we talked to regional, when we first started the grant, we looked and kept it wide if we wanted to consider other types of development outside of the village planning area. And given the intent of the grant, we were encouraged to refocus to a high density area such as our village planning area. So that's what we did. We do have planning money and regional planning through discussions with them and developing an understanding of our work scope, and the contract brought up some history of, you know, we have had discussions and maybe there's other things outside of the village planning area that we may want to consider, particularly as we go down the path and get closer to entertaining modifications to zoning regulations. So we do have some planning money in the budget, and we very well may be asking them for some side conversations along with that planning grant. When we do that, if we ultimately decide that we're going to change zoning regulations, we should encompass, make it as holistic as we can, because it's a significant undertaking and it ultimately require a town vote. So that was a good call on Adam's part when he was trying to understand the scope of work. And then Chris, you were starting to define the different zoning areas, which is probably important too.
Sure. So if you look at the map that's on the screen, right in the center is the village. As you can see by all the cute little streets. I don't know if people can see where my cursor is, but this cross right here, this is where we're sitting out Holly Hall. This is the four-way intersection here at Main Street. We created 3 zones. One is the village planning area, which is the one you can see in this dashed red and yellow lines. The predominantly green area on this map, which if I zoom out is a lot of it, that's the conservation. And the remaining is the rural ag. As you see, it's the village planning area is bigger than the old village, which sort of stopped out right around basically this area here. We expanded it out at the time when we were discussing this. It goes as far as Plank Road now. We get down to Hewitt Road. And what the theory was where would our village growth patterns want to be extended out? How would we want to see our village grow outward as well as trying to fill inward? This question came up, how much available land is there in the village? It's pretty sparse. What land there is, a lot of it isn't up for sale and the folks really don't want to move with it, the current owners. So when we looked at that, we looked at where do we grow next? And it's the outskirts, which makes sense. Like Hewitt Road is a beautiful spot for sort of another next sort of growth area. And along Lover's Lane, there's some great development opportunities. And along Plank Road, there's some large tracts that really could use that could really be infilled and not be that catastrophic. So that's the background behind that.
I have a question. Just something I was reading in the minutes from last time, or bringing up about properties that people don't want to sell, but they don't want to do anything with. I'm just thinking of the property on Basin Street. It's an old house there, right? Am I remembering? Just as you go down on the left?
There's 2 of them.
2 of them, yeah. I mean, is it basically the law or the rules that as long as you pay taxes, you can do whatever you want? They can just leave that like that? They don't have to tear down the houses for safety or sanitation reasons or anything?
The closest you could hope for would be possibly from a public health standpoint. The health officer would have to be involved. And then it goes to the litigation process. Vermont's not big on tearing stuff down. And that's
Well,
an
it wouldn't be
unfortunate.
much tearing down. It looks like it's about ready to fall down, so I don't know. That seems, I don't know. It's just something I'm not used to. I still haven't gotten used to everything in Vermont, so.
Yeah,
Even
it's
even if you tear it down, it doesn't mean the person's gonna sell the land.
Well, I
correct.
know, I understand that, but it would, make the area a little more appealing.
They still alive?
Yeah, and then right behind it, it's even trickier. It's behind the houses on the left. There's a big it feels like a big green open area that goes down to the river, and there's a Bob's old house that's down there. It's a little dilapidated currently. None of that's really developable because it's all floodplain.
All right.
So
Well, somebody, I can't remember where, but somebody was telling me someone was working on trying to get a dog park down there.
Right. There was talk of doing that on the right hand side over the where the septic reservoirs
Okay,
are.
yeah, okay.
And that's actually one of the few places that actually we could do it without having much impact, which would be a great spot for it.
So,
But,
so what you're talking about is on the left of that.
yeah, on the right, the big
Oh,
open
all the way.
green meadow you see, there's 2 huge septic tanks there. And that's the downtown, our downtown
Right.
sewer system in Bristol.
Right.
So Fred, you had a question?
Yeah, could you show the map again?
Yeah. Share it so I can see it. My bad. And there.
My question was the western line.
Mhm.
It doesn't appear it goes along any road. The Burpee Road. Where is Burpee Road? Oh, that's probably the next solid line just west of it.
Yeah, Burpee Road is right here.
Mhm.
The northern line is the same.
So how did that get determined? That high density thing that kind of just goes through no man's land.
Because most of the land on the
That's
left
difficult.
of that in this red, so the red is also our quote unquote commercial zone. And when you look down through there, you've got cemetery, you have the former landfill, and you've got 4 active gravel pits. You've got the 3 town gravel pits and Perry Kilburns. And then it butts into a landfill. And the orange this is all Mount Aid property right here. So that's really undevelopable. But that's how we drew that, was we knew that this land to the west of this line in the red was virtually undevelopable.
Okay. And the orange to the south.
Down in here.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is Hewitt Road here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Lover's Lane. This is Hewitt Road. That was why we thought it made sense. And this was the old commercial corridor where we wanted to keep. You had Tom Lathrop's mill here, and A. Johnson starts in here as well. And to keep it as a commercial corridor, because that is our only commercial corridor we have in the town.
So it's residential / commercial.
No, residential single family homes are actually prohibited in the red.
In the red. What
Yeah.
about the orange to the east?
Orange is village
I
mix.
see it as orange.
This here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the orange crosshash, like I said, this is village mix and this is village mix, and that is just that, it's a mix. It's a combination residential, commercial, and office, as we used to call it. So other than the red, single family homes are allowed everywhere on this map.
And apartment units would be, multiple family units would be available too.
And you actually could do multifamily through a conditional use in the commercial area. What the hope would be to promote mixed use, where you would have commercial or light industrial on the ground floor and apartments on the top. Is what the vision was, to try to infill with a good balance.
So Chris is probably has the history on this map, because the last town plan revision just drew forward the existing map, which was generated from the previous plan. And there wasn't any, the planning commission at the, what was it, 2017?
Yeah, 16, 17.
16, 17 revision didn't see any need to change that. So our board, with the exception of Brother Sayer,
And he's here somewhere.
and yeah, and Chris, pulled the history on a lot of why these areas were put the way they were. And not to say that they don't change in the future, but it's old. It's old. It's just older information. Does anybody else have any questions about background information of where we're at with our housing effort? Okay.
So
Oops.
I'm sorry, I had to get the mute button.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So no, that's okay. So for the idea of possible rezoning or changing those things, are we talking about the possibility of doing that just in that orange section, or in the whole village?
Well, the village planning area, which Chris had highlighted as the red dash, yellow dash line.
Yeah, right.
Is where we're gonna focus our attention for our grant. And then
Right.
it seems like, Adam had identified it, and it seems like if we're gonna go to the trouble of modifying potentially zoning regulations, if we do that, which seems likely, we should consider if there's anything else that we want to massage outside of the planning grant as well, as opposed to turn around and decide another year or two that there's stuff to be done. So there's probably some level of discussion that's ancillary to the planning grant.
Yeah, could I add,
Jeff?
Kevin, when we wrote the original draft of our grant proposal, we included both the village planning area and the rural planning area. And then the state came back and said, this grant is not intended for use in rural areas. It's intended for highly or densely populated areas. So take that out. So we did. Otherwise we wouldn't get a grant. But that can be dealt with, as Kevin said, in an additional fashion. You still use grant money for it.
Right, because you do have money set aside in your budget every year for contract services that you could utilize to finish the process and pick up some of the rural major changes you might want to. I wouldn't get into the minutia of grammar on each individual use. Trust me, that's years and years of pain.
Yeah.
But if there's big glaring holes that we should address, absolutely. But the focus on the grant is the orange and red box there.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I didn't get it, as I said before, we didn't get the contract out on time for everybody to have a chance to look at it, but I thought in the interest of moving things forward, we would kind of cruise through it, and if there's anything that caught anybody's eye that wanted further discussion, we could do that.
I just gotta find it real quick. It's here. Sure.
I did get a chance to look at it a little bit. It came pretty late in the day. But so back up a little bit. Interestingly enough, regional planning called this, the title on this document is boilerplate. So there's pretty contractual language in here. It starts by making the agreement, and then it goes to the scope of work, which defines pretty well given the different efforts that we had on this project, we developed a scope of work for our grant. We developed a scope of work to request proposals with as well. And he reflects both of those documents in here to the extent that the RFP, we wanted to keep some of those sections alive. And then the state, as part of the grant award, had certain requirements for particularly subcontractors and EOE sort of things. So he refers to those as well. So you take a minute, and if I have any questions about that, I'll try to answer them or get answers. Talks a little bit about schedule. That's consistent with what the grant requirement is. If you recall, we did get a sort of a waiver from the Department of Housing that we could put any zoning mods to vote at town meeting in 2024 and still be compliant with their timeline requirements. So, Fred.
In doing this work, are there benefits that projects or the community gets from the state or anyone else, or from Act 250 or things like this? Or is it just an effort on our part to be more consumer friendly towards housing within the concentrated area?
So this specific task is mostly to realize more housing. There is a consideration within the grant, and we will be talking hopefully with Adam about it. I can't remember the specific. I think it's called out in one of those documents. It's called determining a town planning area. And if we which is a state defined term, and so like particularly like for instance the village area, if we go through all the hoops and determine that we can set up, apply for, and are approved as a town planning area for basically the village, then it has a number of advantages with regard to Act 250's waived for development. There's a certain amount of additional grant incentives, if you will, for development. And there's some things like that. The two big things with a town planning area, I think they got that term right, is you have to have the city water and city sewer. So we only have half of that. And I don't know if we go through, as we go through this exercise, if we can get a determination that we've got adequate lot size, adequate areas, adequate soils and all that kind of stuff, excuse me, for in ground, and could somehow work around that public sewer thing, or if that would have to eventually be something that we'd have to plan seriously about in order to get that designation.
So are
But
you
there-
saying that whole area that was in that, was it yellow and green box is not all of that is town water and sewage?
I believe that's correct.
That's correct. So the water is to most of that region. The only place that we have town sewer is along Main Street in Bristol.
Okay.
And only a portion of the means.
Yeah, and we're capped out on capacity at this point in time. We really can't add much more.
I did have a question about that. I don't know, I've heard different stories from different people, but does each building on Main Street there have an allotted amount of I guess wastewater capacity? How does that?
So how it was done, it was sort of a first come, first served basis when the system was first put in.
Right.
And it's pretty much stayed that way. As capacity comes available, There is a wastewater board, or I don't remember their exact title, but request for more allocation goes to that group. They review the utilization, and those numbers are calculated by some crazy state formula that nobody can explain.
So it doesn't go, the water usage doesn't go with the building. It's determined by who needs it. Is that what you're saying?
Right, so today, let's say, I'll use the laundromat because we know they're a fairly high consumer of water. But they have their own, they have their own system. I take that back. We'll go with Snaps or a restaurant. Restaurants consume a large volume of water.
Right.
If Snaps was to close tomorrow and was to become just a retail store, their need for allocation would reduce. But the owners don't have to give up their allocation. Some owners have buildings that are sitting on allocation they aren't using currently, with the hopes of keeping their redevelopment options open. So
Okay, I see what you're saying.
yeah, so every connection is its own beast.
So that's a little bit,
So Kevin, if I could, I think what you were talking about was the neighborhood development area
yes,
designation.
There we go.
Okay. So what we said in the grant application was that, and I can
we would
read it here
consider,
because I just finally found it.
we would consider, I think.
We would see, we would explore whether the village planning area is eligible for designation as a neighborhood development area, and whether that would help us reach our housing goals.
Yes.
So,
And it would bring
And
benefits.
there are benefits.
yes, and the state has a list.
Yeah, so I mean, including the ones I just mentioned, I just didn't have the
Yeah,
terms right.
no, I couldn't think of it either. I had to look it up.
Same here, I'm like, It's not- town's not right, but I can't remember.
Act 250 projects receive a 50% discount on application fees. Mixed income projects are exempt from Act 250 regulations. There's a couple of things, different things.
And I don't know if they made the change in time or not, but there was talk of changing the wastewater requirement.
It says for those seeking NDA designation in a village without a sewer system, a community or alternative wastewater system approved by the Agency of Natural Resources is required. I don't know exactly what that means. You would have a better sense than I.
Means you're open for proposals.
Yeah, okay.
So that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move along then. So he is reflecting the grant for a fee. Payment process, and then insurance, all is fun. And then the EOE. Records retention falls pretty much in within, we will end up owning the documents. We need to provide them obviously with stuff, and then they will turn over to us a deliverable. So it's contractual that who's going to do what and when and why and when they have to get permission.
And this is pretty boilerplate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
When,
it. So,
when do they promise to be done by?
so he's committing to be done at the grant due date, which was what, 20?
January 2022, is that what it said?
Yeah, 20.
Complete work to be performed under this agreement no later than December 31, 2023.
Which I think is a grant due
Oh,
date.
yeah, December 31st, 2023.
Because we have to have everything submitted to the state of Vermont by the January 2020. 24. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Does anybody have any other questions on the contract? Everybody, so the next question, is everybody in agreement that we should proceed?
Stop share so we can see bodies. Yeah,
I'm not sure at this point if we need to formalize that other than anybody that's screaming about it. So I don't see
Do you
anybody
need
screaming.
a proposal to approve? No.
I wasn't intending to
Okay.
take action.
Okay.
We have been pretty, we have been discussing this with the intent to do it right along, so I don't
Fine with
see.
me.
Oh, I did put it, yes, I did put it down as an action to review and approve, so I guess I need an action, a motion to approve or accept the grant and pass it on. We need to, from this point, we need to pass it to Melissa, or excuse me, Valerie, who will send it to the select board, and they are the approving authority. We can recommend approval.
acceptance of the contract as presented, right?
Well, shall I make a motion?
You can do that.
I move that we accept the contract as presented.
Melissa seconds. Is there any further discussion? Okay, everybody that is in favor, say aye, raise your hand, or
I,
All right.
anything else? Anybody opposed? Sound like it goes. The next thing is discussion point. I guess I'll bore you a little bit. There was a housing conference last Tuesday, I think it was, and I did go. It was put on by the Vermont Community Development Association, which is a consortium of movers and shakers in the community development arena, including state, private entities, a lot of planning commissions, regional planning commissions, whatnot. I do have links to some of the slide presentations that again came pretty late. I did write down here some impressions that I got through the day. A couple that really struck me, and one of them is, you can see it coming, was the amount of public grants, and I guess you could say is public funding that's intertwined in a lot of particularly affordable housing projects. And it's not a one source grant sort of thing. These people that are successful retrofitting housing, particularly if it's low income, are getting multiple sources to make the project viable from their point of view. The other thing that probably, and like I said, you could see that coming with basically some of the activity going on right here in town as well as the surrounding area. But the other thing that I came away with that I didn't anticipate, and it sort of goes hand in hand, is there was a lot of discussion about private-public partnerships, I guess, used for a lack of a better word. In some back years, it would have been called municipal infrastructure, but now it's called public-private, where more and more municipalities or grants are funding infrastructure, making that load off a developer to make the project more feasible. And there was a lot of talk about development of any type of housing, any type of anything, how it increases the grand list. And that struck me as odd because probably, well, you know, I was going to say a few years ago, but it's probably 40, 50 years ago, any new house that came in town, it's going to be a tax burden, more kids in the schools, and any sort of development, we need to get impact fees out of them for all the increased infrastructure development and reliability of operations and on and on. So the whole strategy today, I believe, from what I could understand, has flipped from impact fees to make a development pay for what sort of services they were going to need, has changed from the developer paying for that cost to the town or municipality arranging or encouraging that to be taken care of, so it's not a burden on the contractor for development. There was discussions throughout the day, and I won't try to, these all blend together, is one individual town, they had a Main Street building that was derelict, I guess. Owner thought it was worth more than it is apparently, and it will sell at an astronomical price. And these people, you know, they're zoning people, planning people for the community are like, you know, how much money, how do we get that piece out of that situation? And then there was this whole long discussion about some sort of municipal town grant type activity to offset the delta between what that piece of property was worth for a developer and what the person selling it wants for it, to make up that gap, to bring that back into useful service. So there's a lot of there was a lot of discussion about that type of stuff too. So I was, like I said, all of a sudden, you know, I'm still thinking about impact fees and, you know, burden on the grand list and all this kind of stuff. You know, I'm old enough, I don't know if I want to say that, but remember when that was the hot button, and now it's not. It's like, how do you get through those things so we can get on with getting the development that we want? Some of the other things, there was discussion, there was some panel presentations about retrofitting houses for low income, but there was certain amount of talk, almost as much talk, about what they call the missing middle, is where you've got people working, but they're not garnering the salary such that they can afford current prices for housing, and how the strategies with that particular type of people could and does come from employers that are having hiring problems, that particularly if you've got an employer that's large enough to have a charity, what do you call it, charity wing, where they have foundations and stuff like that that could support some sort of thing, again, to get a lot of the overhead costs that the developer puts money into but doesn't see any return on, offset, so that the employer would get housing that fits the affordability of their desired work market and would bring people to the area that would fill their employment need. There was a little bit of discussion about brownfields, and again, it was like, you know, that's a sunk cost for a developer, but maybe it's the sort of thing that if you want to revitalize your downtown, I think this is maybe a Springfield question, which is right for this whole concept, is if you want to revitalize and get people in there, well, then look at some sort of partnership where a municipality can leverage a certain amount of bonding, granting, or whatever, to get through that, so that the developer can start the project at the point where they see value in return. Like I said, the slides, I got them, I think they came yesterday, I just noticed them today, and I will send those out so that you can look at them.
That'd be great.
And peruse them and develop your own opinions of them. It was a good conference, but I shouldn't say I had higher expectations, because I didn't know what I was getting into, but there's no magic bullet coming out of it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts about Any of that? Crickets.
Everything comes full circle.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, you got school system that's, well, school buildings are what, half full now, so.
Right, I mean, we're seeing, I do this in a number of towns, and I mean, Moncton and Starksville have not seen any real growth in years.
In population.
Yeah, Starksville, I mean, up until even 5 years ago, they had a member on their planning commission who, anytime they talked about trying to increase density or expand their housing market, would basically slam his hand, we can't afford to put any more kids in the damn school, blah, blah, blah. 3 years later, the school's on the chopping block because they don't have enough kids in it. So it's one of those, be careful what you wish for.
Well, it's a general principle, the bigger the pool, the more you spread out the costs. That's,
And intertwined with a lot of discussion, and we've talked about these things, and regional planning has been pretty clear in the regional plan about, you know, cost of housing, age of housing, condition of housing, weatherization challenges with housing. You know, there was one comment made at one point where an individual said, you know, all these net zero projects is great and it's aspirational, but we've got people that are not living in affordable housing right now, and some of that stuff may not get done first time around or whatever. You know? So yeah, housing, a lot of those housing comments, you can just go back to the regional plan.
I mean, it's fun. I mean, like,
Pluck that stuff down.
I know that Starksville right now is focusing heavily on their mobile homes, especially their parks. Many of them are very dated. They're very inefficient homes. They're not easy to heat. Green Mountain Power gave a presentation that they would love to put a solar field up to help with Brookside, which is their big trailer park in the middle of the village. The problem is, put heat pumps on a mobile home that is energy inefficient is inefficient. So trying to figure out the subsidies to possibly help those homeowners replace their very outdated, antiquated homes it's a challenge. A scary number for that town. Again, I hate to keep going back to that, but we just had this meeting, that's why it's so fresh. In the town of Starksville, 1 in 5 people lives in an ACCT-owned mobile home park. Ashland County's got a large number of parks. So it's the focus that we don't talk about a lot. It's one that I say that because I do hope we look at that some as well.
Okay. That's that. So I don't have any new business. So at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. So any public comment?
Jim, you got anything?
No? Okay. So that brings us down to item 7. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, come on now.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
You're a second?
Rob's on it.
Second? All those in favor? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Give me back 4 minutes tonight.
Thank you all.
bye-bye. We accomplished something.
Yeah.